Hello everyone. Today we're going to talk about how to tell whether a graph is positive or negative. More formally, we say that the function f of x is greater than 0 or the function f of x is less than 0. The function is positive for domain intervals where the graph is above the x-axis, and the function is negative on domain intervals where the graph is below the x-axis. This line has a domain from negative infinity to positive infinity. We notice that the graph has its 0 at x equals 6. We notice that the graph is above the x-axis on the domain interval from negative infinity until x equals 6. We use a round open bracket for the 6 because at x equals 6 the value of the function is 0 and therefore it is not positive. Thus we do not include x equals 6 in this interval. To figure out where the graph is negative, we look at where the graph is below the x-axis. We then see that the graph is negative on the interval from x equals 6 until positive infinity. Once again, since the function's value is 0 at x equals 6, it is not negative, and therefore we use the open bracket and do not include 6 in the interval. This function has a domain from negative infinity to positive infinity and has zeros at negative 4, negative 2, and positive 1. To figure out where the graph is positive, we once again look for what sections of the graph are above the x-axis, and in this one we find 2. Therefore, the graph is positive on the domain intervals from negative infinity to negative 4 and from negative 2 to positive 1. To see where the graph is negative, we need to look for parts of the graph that are below the x-axis. So there's one there, and here's another one here. Then we need to figure out what domain intervals these are. Reading the domain interval, we see that the function is negative from negative 4 to negative 2, and then from 2 to positive infinity. Also notice that when you look at that, the entire domain from negative infinity to infinity is represented somewhere in here. At x equals negative 4, x equals negative 2, and x equals 1, the function's value is 0. From negative infinity to negative 4 and negative 2 to positive 1, the function is positive. And from negative 4 to negative 2 and 2 to positive infinity, the function is negative. Here's a function that is kind of a weird domain. The domain of this function is from negative 9 to negative 5 and from positive 3 to positive infinity. This function does not have any zeros. If we look at the graph of the function, we notice that it is above the x-axis in its entirety. Therefore, here we have a function which is positive over its entire domain. So to recap, first, notice where the zeros are. Second, figure out where the graph is above and below the x-axis. Then, write the domain intervals where the graph is above the x-axis for where the graph is positive, and write the domain intervals for where the graph is below the x-axis for where the graph is negative.